When you look at the spectrum, Cinema Vérité is actually a godsend or a huge ray of glimmering hope for cinematographers who maybe don't have tons and tons of cash, tons and tons of resources in terms of manpower. I'm Michael, cinematographer, DP, based in Taipei, Taiwan. Cinema Vérité is an interesting term that I came across in the past year or so, and I didn't know that I'd actually been practicing some form of Cinema Vérité over the past 7-8 years. Naturally, I wanted to do some research, learn a little bit more about Cinema Vérité. Now, history has never been a strong subject of mine, but I do know that it started around the 1950s in France and slowly made its way to the US, but I'm assuming it's around the time where technology reached a point in camera technology and in lensing such that filmmakers were able to take these huge cameras that were slowly becoming more and more reasonable to take outside, carry around, and follow around people's lives. And that's exactly, to my understanding, where the birth of Cinema Vérité took place. The way I see it is it's kind of a sliding scale, because maybe on one end of the scale is the most ghetto, unprofessional form of Cinema Vérité, where maybe you're just taking your cell phone and you're taking random clips here and there of daily life, but you're not doing any directing, you're not augmenting, you're not changing too many things in terms of the lighting and what's going on, what the character is doing, but you're simply following someone or a group of people and documenting it, and later on to be presented in the form of a verite film. On the other side of the spectrum is where things are heavily modified, heavily tweaked. And in the cinematography world, usually that's in feature films where the story is completely made up. The actors are all acting a different character. It's all scripted. There's light, there's sound, there's usually a very large crew. When you look at the spectrum, I think Cinema Vérité is actually a godsend, or maybe a huge ray of glimmering hope for cinematographers who maybe don't have tons and tons of cash, tons and tons of resources in terms of manpower, overall filmmaking resources. Because when you look at something like a feature film, it's usually on the scale of millions and millions of US dollars. And I'm not saying that Cinema Vérité films are cheap. I'm sure there are expensive ones, and I've been involved in pretty big productions across the world in terms of Cinema Vérité. But usually when there's business involved, it's probably not going to be 100% authentic. There's probably going to be an agenda. There's going to be some kind of skeleton form of what type of story they want to be communicated in a documentary verite film. So when I say this is a huge ray of hope about, yes, I am a DP, I'm a cinematographer, but I haven't shot a feature film yet. So therefore, can I still call myself a cinematographer? Cinematographers in the space of Cinema Vérité, when we lean towards this end of the spectrum of where I'm saying it's authentic and we're not changing things, we're simply following subjects in order to share their experience with the audience and other viewers of the verite film. I think it's really cool because it's something that you could do right now if you have zero skills. In order to make this video a little more educational and helpful, I kind of want to share with you what I've learned along the way. One of the first professionally paid verite films that I can remember was in 2018, where I followed some professional esports players here in Taipei, Taiwan, and it was simply just me and my camera. A talking or debating point in Cinema Vérité is, should you be a fly on the wall where you do not have any impact whatsoever in what's going on in the character's life, in the hero's life? Or can you do things like interviews? Can you do things like add a little bit of lighting? Can you do things like work with the post-production crew to craft the story in post-production to the way that the end client wants? It's open to interpretation. I'm not here to say I'm defining what is Cinema Vérité, what is not Cinema Vérité, what is outside of the constraints, and what is okay for this theory or this approach to documentary filmmaking. In my research, I found that there are Cinema Vérité's films historically that the cameraman and maybe the sound man, they are known to be a part in the production process. And does that make it less pure? Does it make it less authentic? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
You look at the Maisels brothers and you have Albert with camera and David with sound. And this is a great way to really just be able to kind of settle into the environment, start to disappear, but also just become kind of a known entity And so once you get past the initial phase of getting to know each other and being kind of an outsider in the room, then you do start to disappear and become an active participant in that scene.
It's a balancing act, because if you simply document and you're a fly on the wall and you don't interact with the characters at all, you risk coming up with a bunch of clips that don't cut together well and don't create sequences that are appealing and understandable and relatable to the audience, and end up just feeling more like a montage. As Cinema Verite progresses, and there's different levels to this. As you level up in Cinema Verite, you can have production budget to have someone like a sound guy, to have another camera person, to have a producer. The more and more people that you introduce into the project on the production side, it probably feels less and less like Cinema Verite, because the characters are going to be affected by having a lot of equipment, a lot of crew around them. So I think at its core, Cinema Verite is probably best kept minimal. And again, I think this is a godsend for cinematographers like me who aren't loaded with cash to make whatever films they want and don't necessarily have the manpower at all times to craft the look to exactly how you want. So Cinema Verite has constraints for the cinematographer to work with the existing light, to work with the existing characters and the existing story, and to flex your creative muscle and to practice how can you package this real life, true to life events in a way that is digestible and relatable to the audience, but also true to the character story. Now, as I mentioned, the first professionally paid Cinema Verite I worked was in esports, and then later on I worked with a production company for a couple of years, a local one here, doing Cinema Verites mostly around Taiwan and Asia, and these productions were a little bit bigger, where we would have 2 cameramen and we would have a producer on set. We would also have another editor. So as your production is getting bigger and you're involving more and more people, you are able to hone in on your own craft. So as a cinematographer, I'm mostly focused on the camera, the lens, and the light. And then other things like the post-production process, the editing, but also things like sound. Now with technology, it makes it very easy. Wireless lavs, high quality shotgun technology, mics at our disposal. So we don't really have to have a sound guy. If you have the resources for a sound guy, I would always highly recommend that. On that point on, I continued esports all the way until even the end of last year. I filmed Cinema Verite for following 3 key characters, pro player / teams in Saudi. And I think Cinema Verites are something that I, as a cinematographer, can continue doing in the meantime while I'm waiting for opportunities to film things like feature films. A lot of people in the filmmaking space who aspire to be DPs and cinematographers, we're always trying to reach for what's the next biggest thing. They're trying to get on bigger sets and bigger productions, and I think that's fine, but we also need to be realistic, also be aware of the industry trends and what's going on, because like I mentioned, feature films usually cost several millions of dollars to shoot. Unless you're strictly a feature film cinematographer, it's not very realistic. And it's something that I'm working towards, but in the meantime, I can also be practicing my cinematography on smaller scale projects like Cinema Verite. I love the word, when I think of the word cinema, it just makes me happy inside, because I just went to a cinema earlier today to buy some tickets to watch some short films, and when I think of the word cinema, I think of cinema glass, which makes me happy, and movies and feature films. As cinematographers, we don't only have to shoot feature films. Cinematographers can also shoot documentary films. We can shoot Cinema Verite. And I'm sure there are other projects, other experiences that cinematographers we can have that will slowly build our skill set and build up our experience, such that no matter the scale of the project, whether it's the most low-hanging fruit Cinema Verite project where you have no budget and it's just you by yourself, or the feature film where you have hundreds of people on set, millions of dollars into the production, we can still be a cinematographer operating along this sliding scale. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that we don't need to be hard on ourselves for not shooting the most glamorous and beautiful projects. I hope this is inspirational to you, and you can go out and shoot some Cinema Verite if that's what you're interested in. Share your work below. I'm interested to learn more about Cinema Verite, improve my skills. But again, going back to my experience with Cinema Verite, if you're able to execute a quality production with minimal resources, you can operate a successful production with more medium to higher budget. The same can't be said if you could only operate on a medium or high budget. When it comes low budget time, you're probably going to have a hard time figuring out how to wear all these hats and do more things than what you typically are assigned in a professional cinematography work scenario.